Hello friends, it's Lee with Lee's Trees. Welcome. Today we're working on our logo tree and we're going to be doing a repotting and maybe a little bit of a prune on it, and it needs some work to it, so hopefully we don't bite off more than we can chew. Again, this is our front of our logo tree here, and I'll turn it around and you can start to see why it needs some work. To the left side, to the back of it, and as you can see it looks like it's coming up off the rock a little bit there, and back around to the front, right side, and back to the front. Let me set this off to the side here for a moment. Now, we did get a really nice pot for it. This pot is made by Brian Youngerman, Intrinsic Bonsai. And I know they say that normally you wouldn't put a juniper in a glazed pot. Let me just adjust the camera and zoom in so you can get a really good look at it here. And give it a spin. I really love the color, and I think the color here is what's going to really go great with the stone that the tree is on. And again, being darker down here looks more like an unglazed surface to go with being a juniper, and that's why we chose this. And I am choosing this as the front of my pot. There is a tiny little, looks like a tiny little flaw spot there, but there's an even larger one right here. But also, if I bring this back around, I'm going to gently, carefully move the camera here. I'm not sure if you can tell, but to me, this actually looks a tiny bit wider here than this side does here, and that will accommodate for how we have the stone tied into the pot. We will get set up to get started working on our tree and our repot here. Like I said, this is going to be a big project today, so stick with us. I'm going to pause this for a moment and move some things around, and we'll be back in a moment. As you can see, I not only have my protective mat here, I've brought in my big plastic container to try to contain everything, since this is going to be a bigger project. And I've got a couple of things we're going to be working on with it. And like I said, some of it is because it looks like it's starting to come off the rock. And I have these little staples here when this was created to hold the moss on. And that's the part where you can see I did leave it to dry out a tiny bit to get started working with this. And I hope I don't bite off more than I can chew, like I was saying a few minutes ago. But it is changing, or it is different from how the original setup was. It was sitting much more upright. In fact, I'll put a picture of the original here in a few moments, right here. I'm just trying to decide how much of this do I truly want to try to get into. I might just need to start with the repotting and go from there. So to start, let's pull some of the moss off and set it off to the side. There's one of them staples there. And I was also, you can see this black stuff here. I'll try to bring that in close. I think that is some of that black slime mold that I was having an issue with in some of the trees. So I don't know how much of this moss I'm going to want to reuse. I do intend on reusing most of the soil. It is a really good Akadama pumice and lava mix. And it doesn't look like it's terribly broken down, like it needs to be replaced, so I'm not worried about that. Alright, so that's most of the moss removed from the top of the pot area. So we're going to wait on what we do with this part up here for a few minutes. You can see as I turn this, hopefully you can see it's got a lot of really great roots to it right there. There's a little bit of moss left over there, not much. And I do know, again, this is tied in, so I am going to have to very carefully cut that so that I can lift it up out of the pot. See what we have here. There's actually two separate wires. And when I was talking before that this tree originally was sitting up higher upright, that's because one day I made the mistake of carrying it by the lip of the pot and not having my hands down up underneath the bottom, and my hand got bumped and it slipped out of my hand and hit the ground hard. Alright, so I've got my two tie-down wires cut. So now, let's see what's going to actually let me cut them off more so that I can set that flat. And they're not poking up in the way. Here, another little staple there. There we go. All right, well, we've got it now. Some of that. There's my old tie-in wires there. I'm going to go off camera for just a second. I have this bucket here. And when I had to work on this before, this is what I did when I had to set it down. and take my hands off of it. All right, so there's our leftover soil. Again, we'll be reusing this in a few moments. Set it out of the way for right now. Find a few more of these. Again, these little staple wire pieces here. Don't want to have them mixed in. Okay. So I took a moment and I put some wire in our pot, our new pot here, some tie-down wire. This is aluminum. It just doesn't have the dark coating to it. And now I'm going to get back to the tree here. Okay. Now as you can see, there's some wires and some epoxy on the stone, and these are copper, unfortunately. I'm trying to decide if I wanted to replace that. I guess I'll leave it for now, even though I know as it gets that green patina, it's supposedly toxic for the roots, so maybe next time we repot it, we'll have to change out the wire, but right now, it doesn't look too terribly bad, so we're going to let it go. See about setting it in here and how far back. Okay, so I know I'm going to need to put that piece of wire down. I'm going to want to move all those roots around the side, so let me set this back over here. Careful. Better. I'm going to get some of our soil here. Of course, this new pot, ceramic pot, is much narrower, thinner than the mica training pot was. We'll be needing that again, so we'll leave it there with our soil scoop. Okay. A little bit of soil on the bottom there. Actually, I don't know if you can see. Yeah, you can see. I mean, I'm not really in the center of the frame, but you can still see me over here. I'm going to go ahead and cut all these out of the way, do a root prune on it, just so I don't have to worry with them getting caught up underneath. And there's a big one up in there we will remove. And we'll leave those little bit there. I know that's all going to be bunched in on the edge of the pot. We'll leave all those to start to grow in this spring. I should mention today is Monday, the 16th of February. It's President's Day. Okay. So I need some more soil underneath the other side, underneath the wires, try to hold it up straight in the pot this way. And if actually I might want to see if I can bend that wire down a tiny bit. To make it a little more stable. That one is bending up some. So let me Okay, so what I did is the wires were coming up a tiny bit, and I just took and put a little down bend into them and see if that's going to help the way it sits. Get them roots tucked in there. Okay, now my problem is at wanting to roll forward. So I did have an idea for that. So again, let me set this back off to the side. So my plan for this, to get it to sit upright in this shallower pot, let's go ahead and set the tree back in, and again we'll get our roots tucked in here. Is I got a few pieces of rock that I'm going to put down in here as sort of like a wedge to keep the rock standing up straighter. And I can already see that this one is much too large. And I've got a piece here, it's a little smaller. And so if I wedge that in there, that's maybe a little too small. Let me try this one and see how that fits. Now I'm moving the soil out from underneath my little rock piece there so that it's sitting straight on the very bottom of the pot. I'm not going to take my hand away too far, but that is standing up right there. And let me look at my angle. It might be just a little too bit straight up and down, so maybe I'll try a slightly smaller rock to wedge under it before I get it tied down. Okay, carefully. Turn it slightly that way. See, the problem is that there's the stone over here. It's thicker here than it is on that side over there. There's like a little spot cut out, so that's why I don't want to. Okay, that's leaning back a little too much, but I think that can be corrected. Be careful I don't destroy my screen there. Yeah, let's maybe try this other one. Oh, that actually I think is going to work. Okay. Again, I don't want to go too far from it, but that actually looks like it's leaning a little bit more. It is coming back a bit, so again, I can maybe put a little extra soil under that side to lift that up a tiny bit. But I think that's going to work. Let's go ahead and see if we can't secure it in right there as it is. I do want to move so that when I tighten this down, I do want the angle of force back this way some. So I want to come from this direction. Oh, hold on. I gotta be careful that I'm not pulling back on that as I'm tightening. Okay, so let's go ahead and get all that out of our way. That we might can use. Now I don't want to tighten it down too much at the moment. We're gonna do one, two. Oh. Again. There we go. Now this is going to be the tricky part. So again, as I turn it, you can see how it is leaning back this way quite a bit. And I don't really want that. I know I might need to put 2 little rocks underneath of it to hold it in place. It's actually looking okay right there for right now. Yeah. I'm just worried about, I don't know, do I maybe need to try to move the thing forward a little in the pot, but then I won't know if I'll be able to tie it down very well. The tie down holes in the pot aren't in the greatest position necessarily. I'm not trying to badmouth the maker. It's just the way it is. Okay, so that looks pretty straight up and down this away. And I think I'm okay with the lean going front. So now we tie this down, and again we'll get this extra wire out of our way. And as we tighten this, hopefully it tightens down on the rocks there a tiny bit and snugs it in place. But see, as I think I'm holding it. I just need to hold it in place without lifting on it. Oops. Hope I didn't over tighten that. Get ready to break it. on this other side where I was twisting, luckily I only broke off that top piece, and it is still a few turns holding it down here, and we can put another turn on it. We're going to come down to the bottom and try and put another little turn on that one. Push it down a little out of the way. Alright, I'm not going to try to move anything else. It's in the pot. It feels stable. I'm not going to try to lift it up, but like I said, it feels stable. It's in there. The angle is okay. So let's get it buried. Hopefully. According to that, we're still filming, so. Actually, I might end up wanting to wait on some of that as we get into working on the rest of it. Take a moment because I do want to make sure to get all the roots tucked down inside. Try and put a little, make sure we get some soil up in between those little stones there. And up under the big stone. Okay. So now let's set this off to the side for a moment. Clean out our tray and set it back. So my problem is that just as you saw the epoxy on the wires that are holding the stone into the pot, there's epoxy on the top of the stone with little loop pieces put in there. Looks like this, holding it down to the stone. And then in that little loop is other wires that are holding the roots to the top of the stone. That's how the tree was tied on and how this was created. I don't know if you can see, zoom in or not. Let me move this just a little bit. And I'll move my camera and bring in here. You can see there's a piece of wire right here wrapping around the tree and holding it down. And I'm worried what's going to happen if I get into too much of this. You know, this moss is pretty dry. I should have kept it wet, or a little wetter. And the issue isn't the watering with the tree, because it does get plenty of water. Again, I was just wanting to try to take it to the next level by putting it in a ceramic pot and fix the appearance of it slightly. And I do have an alternate plan that I don't know is going to be as good or as effective. If I don't get into it too much, maybe don't peel all that off of it. So let me consider this. So in my bucket, I have this is from the Bonsai Learning Center down in Statesville, and it is called Super Muck. At least it's their version of muck, and it is double wire tied. It's double bagged, double wire tied in here. Just give it a quick smell, make sure it didn't go bad. This is ground up sphagnum moss, akadama, and I believe there might be one other thing, but akadama finds sphagnum moss and something else. As you can see, it's pretty wet and moist. And I was just thinking maybe if I apply some more and then put some more moss on it and hold it in, it might not look quite so bad. So almost like putty. I want to see if we can just pack some of this moss up in there, up underneath all those roots. The problem is I've got a lot of it falling down into the pot, and it's very organic-y stuff, and I don't necessarily want that. So let me put a little piece of paper there to try to catch some of it and see if we can start. There's a little bit of a crack down there. Let's see if we can, almost like putty, like I was saying, or stucco work, pack it up under in there. I am thinking of leaving this spot open to try and let the roots come down a bit more, or make it keep the moss. Keep the moss off the trunk some. I know everyone talks about having moss on the trunk will rot it, and holds the moisture in there and allows it to rot the trunk some. So I was going to try to keep some of that away from it, but it actually almost seems to be working. It seems like it's filling up inside there. I've been pushing it with my thumb, packing it up in. And I'm not going to put a little extra. Oh, there's a root of some kind in there. Yeah, I don't know if that'll stick on the back side of that. It might be too dry. Spin that a little. I was going to see if I could fill in this little hole here a tiny bit. put our moss on top. Okay. Now, I'm not worried about this little stuff that's all falling off. I don't know that I really want to pick it back up to pack underneath there, because it's going to have some of this other gravel mixed in with it. I say gravel, but it's the pumice and lava rock. And this, again, is more muck, so I don't really want the coarse stuff. And I will say I purchased this bag of super muck about 2.5 years ago. I keep it in this plastic container out of the sun. And like I say, it still smells like dirt. It hasn't gone rancid or bad, doesn't smell moldy. Pretty good stuff. Okay. Let me see, some of that falls off. You don't want it mixing in with the other soil too much. Feels like there's like a little pocket or hollow right here. So let's see if I can just pack a little up in there. Oops, I ended up knocking some more off. Dang it. Okay. So as you can see, I got a spray bottle. Rinse my hands off a little bit and grab the spray bottle to start working on some of this. I'm going to give this moss all a good spritz here. Some of these pieces I'll be reusing. Unfortunately, I don't have any other moss to use, so I pretty much have to reuse this. And this is why I keep a lot of these little short pieces of wire. And I don't want to reuse all those old staples that I was taking off. It's basically just wire cut in little pieces and folded into a little U. I just don't want to reuse those others again because they are copper. I'd rather go back with aluminum. I was watching, that one's a little small, but that's okay. I was watching a while back Ryan Neal, and he was on Bonsai Mirai, and the reason he uses steel wires when he ties trees into pots is because the copper wire, again, will, the green, as it tarnishes, that green tarnish, it can become toxic to the tree, is what he was saying. And as you can hear, I've got the kitty meowing at me, wanting to know what I'm doing, who I'm talking to. Oh, that was a little thin, but we can readjust all these as we use them. I'm just going to make a few of them real quick here, let you see the process. So I've got, turn so you can see it a little better. I'm going to take this piece of moss here and lay it up there. Again, just sort of push the wire through the moss into the muck and hold it in place. And I will need some more. Actually, let me maybe try a different method. So I do have these other pieces that are slightly larger that came off the bottom of the pot. Well, here, first thing, let's start with what's most important. So we can take and give everything a little bit of a spritz there. Before we do too much moss, there's my other chopstick I was looking for. Right here along the edge, there is a little bit of a gap still. So before we do anything, let's make sure we have our bonsai soil mixed down in there. And that is filled in with no air holes. Okay. Now that looks a little better. And then we can put a staple in there. And a big one in over here. And a little one there. Little one there. So that's got that bottom piece covered. And now that looks like it's going to wrap around and cover that. Staples there. And when I do water this, I water it very carefully. I just very gently give the water so that it gently soaks through the moss into the muck. I don't just hit it with a hose or anything. I do use a watering can for it. So there is a little bit of a hole or gap right here where there's a little bit of a transition, but we can really easily just pack in a little few pieces of moss here and there. Okay. Definitely going to need some more staples here. So now I want to use this thinner piece up here. It is a little big there. See, let you be able to see what I'm doing a little better. And push that one in. Push that one in. Again, just like stapling some fabric on a chair or something. I'm stapling my moss into the muck. Now I've got another little piece here. I'll just throw over the top. I'll put us a staple here. One more little staple up top here. Try to hold that down. All right. Turn and see how we're looking on all sides. I could probably use a couple more staples here to hold this into the side a little bit better. Now, it is still leaning away from me a little bit, but again, because the way the tree is sitting on the rock, it's coming back to you, back to the front. You can see I've got most of the moss covering my dirt spot there, the back of the stone, and where our main root area is. Look at the front. It's not looking too terribly bad. And clean all that off. I am glad, because this is sitting up a little higher, that's not too terribly, that there's not a really dark line there from the old soil. So now we just need to finish the potting part of it and get some, we can move our muck out of the way here and get some more soil in here and filled in. I'm trying to be careful, because in the bottom, this isn't all 100% bonsai soil. There is a layer down up underneath of there that is just regular gravel that we use as filler underneath. I don't want to mix it in. I don't know where the strings came from. Okay, and in fact that might just be a tiny bit too much. Yeah, see here, you can see there's a little piece of epoxy that you can see right there that's holding, at least I believe that's epoxy. That might be part of the stone, but I don't believe it is. Yeah, that's epoxy, unfortunately. Eventually we'll have to get rid of that. Or hopefully that'll, maybe hit it with a magic marker or something and darken it up so you can't see it. That might be a better plan. Alright, so let's get the chopstick in and get this worked in here. And luckily you can't see the stone that I've been using to prop it up, to have it standing up a little taller and not leaning over so much. Especially where those tie-down wires are. I want to make sure, and where my other stones are, I want to make sure I get that chopsticked in real good. And say this mix of lava, pumice rock, and akadama is a bit coarser than what I have. I'm not saying that's a good or a bad thing. Again, it is what it is. But it's all in really good shape. You can see it hasn't broken down much. Now, we can put a little bit of the top dressing back on it. I do want to keep this part here. This is some of that really nice velvety moss. Most of this started out as what we would call the fern moss, because when you look at the little pieces, they look like little ferns. But I honestly think that the velvet moss and fern moss is the same thing, just in different life stages. Got a little piece of velvet moss I'm going to pack in here. But again, even if it is two different ones, that's okay, because it just makes it look more natural having two different mosses on there. So like I said, I am going to use a little bit more of this old moss as a top dressing. I don't want to use a lot of it, because again, a lot of it had the black slime mold in it. So I'm going to try not to use too much. But for the rest of it, I do have my mixture of powdered sphagnum moss and the velvet moss. So let me grab that. And this is the ground up powdered velvet moss and the sphagnum moss. You can see it's very powdery. And we will put some in the back here. Nice little layer back there. I am planning, I've seen a few other YouTube people do this. I'm going to try to save a little bit of this. I do have a small piece started in the indoor grow room area, but I was going to try to make a big tray and sprinkle this all over some soil and see if I can't get a big tray of moss to start growing. So I don't want to use all of it. I wanted to save some of it. I'm just glad I didn't use it all up before I had a chance to cover it here. Now, just to careful, keep it on there. And you can give all of that. Okay, we got all that nice and damp, so it will stay where it is. Okay, let's see what our next plan of action is. For right now, let's clean up for a moment. So like I said, we cleaned up our workspace a little bit before we move on to our next part of our project with our logo tree. And I'm hoping you're really liking the look of it and the new pot and the new angle. I really do. I'm just moving it a little so I can get a little more straight on view of it. Again, I think the glazed portion here really matches the rock really well. A little extra mud and muck up there, see if we can just clean some of that off. Again, I'll try to do something about that piece of epoxy here in a little while after the stone dries. I'll worry with that in a few days, but we'll give it another turn. Again, this is back to the left side, or the spine, the back, the right side, and back to the front. I do want to spin it around. I do want to just give that a little bit of a mist there, just to keep that a little bit damp. And now let's get into pruning. I haven't pruned this in a while, and it could use it. And that's actually a piece from the bald cypress there. And bald cypress limbs. I do have a few long pieces. This didn't get a winter or a fall prune work to it, so we're going to work on that while we've got it here, and again get it set up ready for spring. And now that it's got a new angle, we need to take a new look at it from different directions. So if I get down on it and give it a look, hope I'm not shaking the camera around too much walking next to it. Get my chair so I can. We'll start with the basics. Anything straight down or on the bottom can come off. Got some other dead leaves up in there. It does need a big thinning. I'm just worried about doing too much to it. But I also have to think about my design now. So where is my main apex? So I believe this is going to be my main apex up here. And if that is the case, then this big branch coming in the front here is almost in the way of everything, of seeing it. That would be my primary branch down here. with our windswept portion. So I believe this one big branch needs to go. That's right up in front. So big cut here. And that certainly opened it up. And let's just get it a little nicer. It's not quite a bulge there. Then, okay, that will give us our main apex. So then let's go to our primary branch. And you can't, this piece, or the piece behind. So I think I am going to take this one off. Again, we'll clean the stub a little bit. This little piece out here. There's some dead needles in there. So that almost, if I put a little bit of wire on this, I'm trying not to move everything around or put too much force on my stone there. And if I put a little wire, that'll almost start to make us a pad right there. So let's... Yeah. Oh, let's see. This is our smaller... Really? 3 millimeter? That's the smaller one. Do I have something even smaller? Yes, this looks smaller. This might be a little too small, but I do think it will work. So let me... There they are. So I'm going to put a piece on that branch and that one. Well, I definitely cut off a lot more wire than what I needed. But that's okay. And now... It might not hurt to bring that all the way out a little farther. And where's my other end here? Okay, that one we can just go ahead and snip off. Let's take a look. So that brought that back branch down. So again, I've got a piece here that's pretty much, again, coming straight off the top. So we'll take it off. That's another one coming off straight, pretty much straight up, but I'm wondering if yeah, we'll go ahead and take it off there. It does have some little crotch growth there. We'll get rid of. I can't take that stub a little bit further back. Okay, so that's everything off to the side. That's everything to the side. Get those to where they're almost at this evil plane. That's coming to the side. So now we'll just find a few of these longer tips and give them a trim. All right. So now we have our nice big secondary branch here. And it has some growth coming straight off the top on it that we can take off. And that one can probably go straight up. And let's see, when we look at this one, I don't really have too much coming straight down. I do have this other little tiny branch in here that I'm not going to worry about wiring on that one. So I can maybe peel some of the bark off the juniper. Alright, so maybe one little piece coming straight down there, but okay. So I do have a bit of a handlebar branch situation in here. And I'm going to go ahead and take this one off because it's the one, since I've got that branch there, I'll keep that one to that side. And that also helps open it up in here so I can see what I'm doing. Alright, a little bit of, again, some cleaning out a little bit of the crotch growth here and there. Alright, so that branch, again, that's a little tiny one coming straight up here. And take it off. So add some more to it. Another one going straight up. All the little tiny pieces. Okay, so that is our secondary branch. And I will think about wiring it after I get the apex taken care of. And again, there's just, these two are so close, they're almost a handlebar branch situation. So if I take that out, that opens it up. I've got this little branch here I can move to the back, or do I want, again, this will be a second one here. And then we'll bring our apex back up. We'll put a little piece of wire on the apex. So for right now, I'm just going to use my secondary branch to anchor this. Again, I'm trying not to jerk on the stone too terribly hard. Yeah, come under that one, over that one. trying to make sure I don't trap too much foliage underneath my piece of wire. So that looks all cleaned out pretty good. Bring it around to the top a little bit. Straighten it up a tiny. Oops, nope, not good. Okay, I need to... Oh, come on. Oh, I didn't get this in here tight enough. I can see I'm pinching a branch that I don't want to pinch. So I had to undo that and move that branch down around on the other side of the wire. And now bring it up. And get it in tight. That was one of the other problems, is I had a big loop in the wire. It wasn't tied up against the trunk. Okay, that looks much better. And let me just put another tiny bit. Okay. So with that, I can bring my secondary branch down a tiny bit. Maybe bring it back up so it doesn't look quite so close to the primary branch. Now that brings my apex here up pretty straight. And I think I want to put a little twist to it. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and get these little long leader pieces trimmed and out of the way. And I can do a little trimming on my secondary branch here. Take that in a bit more. Take this little piece out right here. All right, let's take another look at everything. Let's be careful. So when I do spin this, you can see on the back side here, there is, it is a tiny bit bare, but I think, again, I've got that other branch tucked and caught underneath. Okay, there we go. And I ended up tearing some foliage off of it, unfortunately. That looks better. That's got that filled in a little bit better. The piece of wire is pretty big. I could probably take it off there. Okay, let's come. See what happens if we try to just bring that back up a bit, how that looks. So now I've got another branch here. I've got some little stuff in the front for my apex. Again, this side of the apex is looking a little rougher, but that should fill in. Oh yeah, this piece is going down now. Take those off. So again, that'll start to form us a little cone apex piece there. We've got our primary branch pad, our secondary branch pad. We've got a little branch in the back that'll start filling out. Of course, these are, going backwards some. So you can make it a little more three-dimensional. And we've got a defined apex. Do I want to put a tiny piece of wire on this? I can always wire it later. It's not going to be that big a deal. Okay. A cat scratching. Get, cat. So, let's take another look here as our front. Back to the left side. To the back. And actually, I may do some more work on this back here. Put me another staple in there. There's one right next to it. So I wonder what would, let me do one of those. Make me a great big staple here to try to hold all of that on until the roots of the moss grow into the muck and it holds itself on. Actually, I do like that. I think that's stuck on really nice. Let's see if I have another little piece here. Actually, I think that's copper. Yeah, that's a little bit. Okay, I think that's going to hold. I can always come back as I water it, maybe over the next few days I can put some more staples in if I need to. Alright, I think that's going to hold. So again, there's our left side. We'll finish our little turn. The back of the tree, the left side, the front, and the right side of the tree. I'm going to take it outside, give it a really good gentle watering, pick some of the juniper needles out of here, and again I'll keep it in the greenhouse for a few weeks. We might have some more cold weather coming next week, but this week it's nice and warm, or warmer I should say. But again, we'll keep it protected for a month or two in the greenhouse. Keep it carefully watered and watch our wire. Make sure it doesn't start to bite in. Thank you for watching. I hope you'll like and subscribe.